Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to today's webinar, Present with Impact from our Build Your Career webinar series. My name is Scott Levine and I'm the membership manager here at the IEEE Computer Society. Each month, we host a webinar on vital business skills that help you excel at your current job and be helpful throughout your career. Before we get started, I'd like to address some housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive an email tomorrow, which will include a summary of the slides and the recording. You can ask any question in the Q&A box you see on your screen. If possible, please reference the slide your question refers to. Roger will answer as many questions as he can following the presentation. It's no secret that success of your career greatly improves as you deliver effective presentations. In addition to today's webinar, the IEEE Computer Site has additional resources available to support your career growth. For instance, our revamped Career Center provides all the tools you need to advance within your career, such as employment prospects, resume assistance, and the latest career advice. Furthermore, by joining the IEEE Computer Society, you can connect with professionals from across the globe and build a network within your technical communities, local chapters, and conferences. More information will be shared with you after the webinar, and you can always learn more at computer.org. Circling back to today's topic, does your audience daydream when you present? Do your talking points miss the mark? Could your delivery skills use a boost? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then today's webinar is just where you need to be. From today's webinar, you'll learn how to analyze your audience, develop one central message that stays with the audience long after you deliver, utilize 10 tools of persuasion, incorporate stories, and structure your talk for maximum impact. Joining us today is Roger Granis of the Granis Group, which he formed in 2005. Prior to that, he spent 17 years at Gartner, where he built the Gartner Sales University, which helped grow revenue from 22 million to 850 million. He also helped in the launch of Gartner's popular podcast, Talking Technology. Roger holds a bachelor's in speech and psychology from Willamette University and did postgraduate studies in theater and creative writing at San Francisco State University. Roger also has a personal connection to IEEE, but I'll let him tell that story, which I believe will come up in one of his first few slides. Roger, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Scott, always a pleasure. Thank you. Welcome everyone from the IEEE Computer Society. I love helping you all out. As Scott mentioned, I do have a personal connection to IEEE, which I will tell you about momentarily. I just went to big slides. I wonder how that happened. There we go. All right, here we go. All right, so Granis Group, we teach soft skills to folks like you, technical experts. And today we'll be looking at one of those soft skills, presenting with impact. So I grew up in San Francisco. As Scott mentioned, I went to San Francisco State to do some creative pursuits after graduating from college. And my dad, growing up, went to IEEE meetings once a month up in San Francisco. I grew up down by the airport, and there he is, Roland Granis, the engineer, and that's me, the day before I started working at Gartner. Anyway, my dad, being a technical expert, enjoyed photographing things he loved most. So he worked, he was an inventor, and he created equipment that went up to connect electricity from the power plant to people's houses and offices. So on vacations, he would pull over the car and take pictures of telephone poles. So I think you and I were connected that way. I worked for Adam Osborne. He invented the first portable computer in 1981. I actually worked for his publishing company. And I'm not saying this to give you too much more of my background, but to talk about something I learned working for him and then later at Gartner. So what Osborne Publishing did was simplify technology. The manuals and instruction guides that came with computers and software were too technical So he made a great living out of simplifying the complex. And that's one of the keys we'll talk about today, is simplifying the complex. I saw that also at Gartner. Our client base, IT professionals like yourselves, would pay pretty good money for research reports and strategic advice. And the thing that we did at Gartner was the same thing I saw with Osborne, and that was the importance of synthesizing. So taking these vast concepts, pulling them together, simplifying them, and then creating the communication, whether it's a book, a research report, or today a presentation, but to structure that simplified, synthesized content in a way that means something to the audience, has them pay attention, and addresses something that's important to them. So a lot of work goes into that. So I'm going to give you the highlights of how to do that well today. So we'll look at how to craft and structure your message, and a lot of the program today will focus on that. I'll touch a little bit on effective delivery skills, but we'll go into that in more in depth in another program we've got coming up later this year. All right, enough about Roger. Who are you? Here's a poll. If you could just take a quick moment. Where are you in your career? Are you a student, maybe a grad student, PhD candidate, or have you started your career, entry level, or maybe you're a team lead, supervisor, manager, maybe you're a senior leader, you're a director, or up in the C-suite. Maybe you're retired. We do get a lot of retirees at programs wanting to keep their brains engaged, keep up with the latest. Right, so we've got about 18% have voted so far. Folks, let's get a few more. Let's try to get to 30. All right, oh, look at that, 33, almost halfway there. Anyone else? Where are you on your career? All right, so we've got about a little over half, so let's go to the results. Okay, we've got a lot of, here we go. The majority are leaders, so team leads and directors, C-suite folks. Great. We've got a few folks at the beginning of their careers, some mid-career, but clearly the vast majority, 40% about, are in fairly senior leaders, so team leads and managers, or directors, C-suite. All right. Okay. Where do you give presentations? At school? How about at work? Do you give them to people who work for you, so you're presenting to your team, or are you presenting to your colleagues, peers, or are you presenting upwards to get approval from leaders? And I think you can vote for a couple of these, up to 2. Or maybe you're presenting externally to business partners and suppliers, or to prospects and clients. So please take a moment to give us your thoughts there. Again, that'll help me focus this, get a sense of where we are. Okay. Thank you for being here today, and thank you, Scott Levine. He works hard behind the scenes to make these all happen. Thank you, Scott. All right, so we've got about half of you have weighed in. So let's go to the results. Okay, work to peers. So what I'm seeing here is a lot of, not so much down, not so much people who work for you, but to people who work for you and up. So managing across the organization and up, and also a lot externally. So we did this program a couple years ago, and this is a lot different audience than back then. So great. All right, thank you. All right, I want you to think about your presentation so that as we go through this, you can apply these to something perhaps you're working on right now. And if you don't have something you're working on, maybe a typical presentation you give so that you can apply these principles right away, so they're not just vague concepts, but they're tools you can put to work right now. All right, so let's start with crafting your message. And I'm a firm believer in doing all the work before you get on stage or to present. Summers White, who's a a state senator from one of our states, Arizona, here in the United States, said that 90% of how well the talk will go is determined before the speaker steps on the platform. So preparation is absolutely key. Again, it gets back to doing that synthesizing, simplifying, structuring your message so that it resonates. When I worked at Gartner and did sales training, a lot of the technical experts would come in with a presentation they had done for clients a few weeks before, and they had not taken that time to slant it to the sales force. And so the sales force did not get a lot of the information they needed. So my job was to help work with them to help them craft and hone that message ahead of time. All right, so one of the things we want to do is in crafting your message, here are the 5-step process. Identify your purpose and objective, analyze the audience, and then here's the meat. What tools of persuasion, of communication are you going to use, and how will you structure your talk so that it's right on target for your specific audience? So you want to think through, what am I really here to do? What's my purpose? Is it to just inform about a new policy, how to use a new piece of equipment? Is it to convince people to change their minds? Or is it to persuade and get them to actually take action? Or is it to inspire them or entertain? And maybe some of that inspiration and entertainment comes into just about every talk, because we're competing with television and Hollywood. So we're not going to be silly, but we want to make our talks on target, engaging, and with a little bit of flair to keep people paying attention. All right, so what's your objective? Be clear on your objective. Here are some that I typically see. Reporting results, gaining approval. Maybe it's to teach a new process, or inspire, motivate the team to take on a new project, launch a new program. Maybe you've got to deliver bad news or sell a service. So again, be clear on your purpose and objective, because that's going to help you pull the right material and present it in the right way. Ultimately, the mountaintop is if you can summarize in one sentence your key message in something like a phrase that pays, that will be a good thing. It's not easy. So let me give you an example. For this talk today, the one we're doing right now, here are 4 drafts of that one sentence. So I'm thinking, what do I want these folks to know, do, or remember above all else? And here's draft 1. If you carefully craft your content, you will build confidence and gain commitment more easily. Again, you see that emphasis on spending time up front to shape and craft your message, because, hey, we get nervous when we present, right? That's natural. It's humans. It's the number one fear for humans. So if you want to control that fear and feel more confident, spend that time up front, carefully crafting your message. All right, so that's draft 1. Not bad. That really is my objective. So now the future drafts I'm about to show you are looking at ways to make it more memorable, maybe a little more clever. Well-crafted content leads to confidence and results. Okay, that's another way to say it. Creating compelling content is the key to confidence and contracts. Contracts meaning getting people to say yes. Okay. And now here's the tightest version. CCC equals C squared. Creating compelling content leads to confidence and contracts. So you can see, I'm not sure any of these are great, but you can see that by me spending time trying to hone it down, that helps drive the content for the whole presentation. Okay, let's look at analyzing your audience. Now, let me start with an example. And the key point here is that you've got to know your audience well. How much do they need to know? What's their attitude? How much time do they have? Because that will really shape how much detail you go into. Here's an example. So I work with a lot of organizations, and I certainly did this at Gartner. I help their product leaders shape their message for different audiences so they can get people to approve the product, get motivated about selling the new product or service, get customers to buy it. So the message with the same product would be different for the CEO, the investors, the suppliers, customers, and sales team. Some of the core messages would be the same, but the level and wording would vary depending on the audience. It's really important to know what level your audience is. So seniority, what's their role, how much knowledge do they currently have with the topic, how receptive are they? So if you think through in advance, there's going to be some resistance, that will help you create some things to diffuse that resistance. And what's their motivation? So let me give the example of this audience today. So as I'm sitting back, in the last week thinking, all right, who's the audience today? Already I've been a little surprised. You are much more senior than the last audience that watched this presentation. So I'm like, that's a surprise. So hopefully I'm going to adjust my message as I go. But my take was initially that from a seniority perspective, you are managers or contributors. So I would actually adjust that now to the top two, C-level and manager. In terms of what role you have in determining the content of your presentation, you're making the decisions. You're creating your own content. You're not speech writing for somebody else. How much knowledge do you have of giving presentations? You're familiar and have some prior knowledge. So you're here to fine tune your skills and knowledge. How receptive? Well, you signed up. You've taken an hour of your life for a program, so I think you're pretty receptive. And your motivation, I think across the board, you want to do better so that you can get better business results, get some maybe praise or recognition for your good work, and lift a burden. Maybe you want to remove some of the fear or questions you have about how to give effective presentations. So that was my analysis of you, and it's important to go through that with your audience. All right, let's talk about motivation. Now, this is something I picked up from my years in sales, and I think it's very relevant here. So as you're presenting to an audience, you want to think about 3 different types of motivation they have. One, an organizational objective motivation. So they've got business objectives that they need to achieve in their fiscal year typically. So their work, somebody you're going to present to, is tasked with achieving 3, 4 top organizational objectives. So you want to see, how does your proposal, your presentation, link to helping them achieve those organizational goals? Second, they've got project or departmental goals that they're doing to help support those organizational goals. And then here's the thing that most people don't think about. What are their personal objectives? What are their hopes and dreams, their fears and burdens that they're experiencing that you can directly impact? So let me explain this further by giving a quick example. So let's imagine you are you're the audience, and the corporate objective, the organizational objective you have, is to reduce costs by 20%. So we're going to think now, we're going to present collectively to a person, a group, and their corporate objectives are reduce costs by 20%. Secondly, we're going to propose one of the ways that we in information technology can impact that cost reduction is by maybe going out to our cloud providers and negotiate a better deal, or maybe put it out for bid, find a lower cost provider. Okay, so that's normally where most people stop, but we want to take it a step further and think, okay, what are the emotional and personal objectives and drivers going on in our audience that we want to touch on or address, and maybe not even in a direct way? Because there's an old saying that people buy with emotion and justify their decisions with logic. So we want to touch on emotions, because that's going to motivate people to say yes if we do it the right way. So some personal motivators might be, well, gee, if we're going to go out and negotiate with cloud providers, that's going to make me a little bit anxious because would that disrupt our normal flow of business? I want to avoid risk. I also, if we're going to do this, I'm thinking about how is this going to impact my performance evaluation at the end of the year. So we want to keep those personal and emotional drivers in mind. Okay, we want to think about other audience factors like how much time do they have? And the rule of thumb is always come in a little bit under. If you got an hour, come in at 58 minutes, 57, so that we're not burdening people. What are their expectations? Think about who influences your audience and how might that impact your presentation. One of the things a lot of people are thinking about when they're being proposed a new idea is, what is my boss going to think of this? So you want to, think, what can I say in my talk that will address that unspoken question? And by giving them a couple of sound bites, maybe a key phrase that pays, a couple of key talking points that they can remember, that will help them sell your idea up the line, get approval from their boss. How many people will be there? Thinking through what questions or objections might arise will help you make your talk more robust. So by answering those questions before they come up, your audience will relax and feel satisfied. And they won't be holding that resistance throughout your entire talk. Who could you contact to learn more about the audience? Get that third party outside of perspective. Who's there? What do they like? What's worked for you in the past? What do they need from you to take action? Again, some more things to think about from about your audience. All right, let's get now that we've thought about our purpose, objective, and who we're talking to, we want to think about how we're going to describe our content. What tools of persuasion can we use that will resonate well, get people to sit up, pay attention, and get them to say yes or get busy implementing something new, reduce resistance, whatever it is you're trying to do. So I know Scott said 10. I've actually whittled it down to 9. I thought one of them was a little bit superfluous. So here are the 9 ways to help hold your audience's attention and make your message stick. One is a memorable concept, like that phrase that pays that we talked about earlier. Having a cohesive structure or a campaign title. If it's a big project, giving it a title. So let's look at some examples. So here are some examples of phrases that pay. Drive sober or get pulled over. So that's something from in the United States that we see all over on traffic signs to get people to not drink and drive. Similarly, to get people to not text and drive, here's like a clever way of saying their one central message. You drive, you text, you pay. Notice how I say that, you like, oh, that sticks. It cuts through the fog, right? It resonates, it's catchy. So if you can come up with a phrase or something that's like that, it will get people to pay attention, remember, and communicate your idea to anyone else outside your audience who's got to, may have a say in that decision. Vote for tolls, lose at the polls. So that's something in my home state here of Connecticut. We're near New York City. There was a proposal to put in tolls on the highway system, and the people opposed to it started a campaign that said, vote for tolls, lose at the polls. You vote for this, Madam Politician, you're going to be voted out of office. So that worked. We don't have tolls on our freeway. All right, a phrase that pays. Some of you of a certain age here in the States might remember the O.J. Simpson trial back in the mid-90s, late 90s. Johnny Cochran, his attorney, had a phrase that paid. And it was, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. and he had O.J. Simpson put on a glove that was too tight, and that, by most experts' opinion, was how O.J. got off. A catchy phrase. All right, a cohesive structure. Here are three examples. 30, 30, 30. That's something our Gartner CEO used when he was at Manny Fernandez, was going out on a road show to promote Gartner when we were about to go public, get on the NASDAQ stock exchange. And his talk was 30, 30, 30. It was 30% growth, 30% improvement on client retention, 30% improvement to the bottom line. 30, 30, 30. Notice how that's simple and clean. When I was a Boy Scout leader, my goals for the year fell under the categories of recruit, retain, record. 1, 2, 3. Here is an acrostic. Engineers always simplify yes. EASY. Also very similar to an acronym. So a cohesive structure to simplify your points and help people follow along, remember, and repeat. Here's another one from my local paper a year or so ago. 30, 30, 30. That same phrase was used when this reporter was talking about our local train system between here and New York City. You might want to give your project, your program, the thing that you're promoting in your presentation, a campaign title that creates a sense of team. It creates a sense of momentum, gives something for people to rally behind. So some of you may be familiar with the liberation of France at the end of World War II. That was D-Day. The D-Day operation was called Operation Overlord. A few years ago, there was a movie called Dunkirk, another mission during World War II that had a campaign title, Operation Dynamo. When I was launching a new product in my career, I called it Operation Leapfrog. Again, giving a title, again, it's got to be a significant program that you're implementing, but giving it a title gets people to pay attention. It helps cut through the noise. All right, so again, some kind of cohesive structure. So number 2, the power of 3. There's something magical about threes. We see it in literature and in show business. 3 little pigs, 3 blind mice, the 3 musketeers. There's something magical about 3. So having 3 key points is one of the key takeaways today. We just saw it in my examples, 30, 30, 30, recruit, retain, record. Here's another one, mistakes, messages, materials. And that was from another talk I gave to IEEE. So let's just step behind the curtain for a minute. As I was creating those 3 key points, number 1, I was thinking, all right, I want 3 key points. I ended up with mistakes, messages, and materials. But I started out with, over the left, mistakes, content, and visuals. Then I went to this great tool online called an alliteration finder. Alliteration means words that start with the same letter. So mistakes, messages, materials, MMM. So I wanted to get to 3 words that all started with the same letter. So I was thinking mistakes, content. Well, content is kind of like message. So let me put the word visuals into the alliteration finder. There's the web address down below, and it came up. You can put in the word visuals, say I want the words that you're going to suggest, start with the letter M. Up came a bunch of words, and we settled on materials. So instead of mistakes, content, and visuals, not bad, 3 words, changing it to 3 words that start with the same letter makes it easier to remember. It just punches through a little bit better. All right, so that was that one. That was the power of 3. All right, number 3, and now this is what most people use when putting together a presentation: data, research, and statistics. And by all means, don't stop doing that. We need that, especially in the world of computing. However, having a presentation with data only gets a little dull. So bringing in some of these other concepts will help you be a little more interesting. So data research statistics, again, I'm sure familiar with this. Bar charts, pie charts, case studies, going to third parties, Harvard Business Review, Gartner, and so forth. So outside research to support your point. Now, when you're using that, here's some tips to maybe make it a little bit better. Stress the new and unusual. So again, we don't want to bore people with too much data research and statistics. We want to say, here's the key finding, and here are a couple of key points that are new and unusual. Because things that are new and unusual stand out. They cut through the noise. Make the abstract concrete. So you've got to maybe sometime give the data and then say what that means to us is this. And again, 100% data equals dull. All right, similar to data research would be case studies, testimonials. So we want to look at, well, what are organizations like ours doing? So there's social proof in that. Your audience is thinking, who else is doing this? I want to make sure I'm not the first one to do it and take that big risk. So if you go in and say, well, here are 5 other companies like us with their logos, and here are here's what they did. That will make your audience feel a lot more comfortable about making the same move. It's kind of like if you're thinking about watching a movie or a book, you might look at the reviews ahead of time. Or if you're thinking about traveling to Finland or Turkey or Czechoslovakia, you might want to ask some neighbors, look online, how did they do, where did they go, how safe was it, the same kind of thing. Or giving quotes, putting in quotes from other companies like yours, or quotes that are relevant to the arguments that you're making. Scott, do we have any questions yet? I don't see any slides. Copies will be available. Let's see what. Okay, let's go to John Hill. Thank you. What if there isn't a way to truly get to know the very important people in your audience? For example, if it's your first presentation within your first month on the job and you're presenting, great. Well, if you know, thanks, great question, John, thank you. Do you know who will be in the audience ahead of time? Maybe you could talk to 1 or 2 of them. Secondly, you could do something right at the beginning. You could talk about the topic, and then you could say something like, hey, I'd like to understand who you are today. Put up a couple of quick questions up on the slides. By a show of hands, bing, bang, boom. You could even have one question be, what's most important to you about the content I'm about to deliver? And have maybe 3 or 4 or 5 options, have people raise their hands. That'll give you a sense of who's in the audience and how deep you've got to go, at certain times. Okay, let's see. And you might also find out in advance who else has presented to this group, if you can. But short of that, getting some names, talking to a couple ahead of time, doing that survey work live in the room might help you also. It'll also help you reduce any fear you might be facing, because now you're getting them to talk, and it help you feel more confident about customizing your content to the right level as you deliver. Great, thank you. And feel free to type in their question. Let's see. Okay, tips for presenting for whom English is not their first language. Okay, couple tips there. 1, don't talk fast, talk slower. 2, do your absolute best to not use local, we'll call it colloquialisms, meaning like if I were to say, hit it out of the park, that's a phrase from baseball in the United States. That phrase may not mean anything to somebody from outside the United States. So try to clip out those local phrases. Yeah, so I think talk slow, don't use those things. Yeah, I think those are the two that I've found, and I've spoken all over the world. Those are the two that I think top of the list. Yes, you will get a copy of the presentation later. Yep. 1, 2, I see the question. Okay, fine. Do you have a rule of thumb for prep time? Okay, thank you, Jeff Blaise. Do you have a rule of thumb for prep time, like 100 hours of prep for every hour of presentation? That ratio, 100 to 1, is actually the right ratio if you're developing a training program, like creating an online program for training or a workshop. Gut feeling, that's a lot of time for a 1-hour presentation. But perhaps if you're a politician, you're the president of the United States, I'm sure 100 hours plus goes into a very important speech like State of the Union. In fact, President Obama's speechwriter grew up in this town where I live, and I saw him speak at the library. He showed, multiple drafts and the hours that go into that. So, I don't think you're going to put in 100 hours unless it's super important. But generally, the right answer is spend more time than you have in the past. So I would say, and it depends how well you know the topic. But even this presentation today that I've given lots of times, I spent 10 hours on for this 1 hour to just fine tune, make sure it was relevant. So I'd say 10 to 1 ballpark. That's going to be my answer there. Thank you, Jeff. All right, so let's motor up and keep the questions coming. All right, next we're talking about a comparison or analogy. And this takes a creative mind. Maybe you want to get other people in on this to help you come up with it. It's something like this. Nervousness is like ocean waves. Ride them like a surfer, and they will propel you forward during your presentation. A new cloud system is like a XYZ. If we put it in place, ABC. So it takes a creative mind, a little bit of time to pull those together. So I think the key there is to say, you know what, I want to come up with an analogy. Maybe you email some of your colleagues or your creative friends, say, hey, I need an analogy for this. Any ideas? I do this all the time with Facebook. Hey, I need to get, and it's a story about X. What do y'all have? And it's amazing what comes back to help me create something a little tighter and better. Okay. Comparisons and analogies help make the intangible tangible. They help simplify complex concepts, and they help the audience understand and help your message stick. But again, it takes some creativity. All right, number 6 of 9. Again, these are ways to describe your key points. One would be to use a story. Stories are the most powerful form of human communication. They've done studies with people with probes on their heads, listening to data, statistics, all the other forms of communication. When people are hearing a story, more parts of the brain light up. We are wired as humans to want to hear stories, listen to stories, and listen to them all the way through. And you can pull stories from outside your work environment. I haven't told any today other than the story about my father taking pictures of telephone poles. But pulling in a story about going to a restaurant, as long as you can pull a key point from that to make your point with the computing presentation, bring in stories. Let's just, by show of poll here, we're going to bring up another poll, another survey. How often do you use stories in your presentations? Never, infrequently, sometimes, most of the time, all the time? Okay, while you're doing that, I'm going to answer a couple more questions. Carla Carter, love that name. Now that's alliteration. It's got the, well, different letters, but k. Carla Carter, love it. Bellevue University. What do you think about using something like Chat GPT? Well, there's a hot topic, and I'm with the speaker community that I'm connected to. This topic is coming up a lot. So, what I'm hearing my colleagues say is, it might give you another source of content from which to think about. So a minute ago I said, if you want to come up with an analogy or a comparison, ask some friends. That Chat GPT might be another place you could go to get some ideas. You certainly, my personal opinion, you don't want to plagiarize. You don't want to just steal directly from what that they came up with that AI tool came up with. But it could be another source of getting ideas, helping you maybe think about something in a way you hadn't come up with on your own. How different is remote presentation from in-person presentation? Number one, the development process should be the same. You want to come up with a really strong message. From a delivery standpoint, when you're doing something remote, you want to have even more ways to engage the audience. So polls and surveys, having people write questions, maybe doing a recap in the middle, something to get away from a one-way delivery. It's a little bit easier to do that one-way delivery in an in-person setting where you can read the audience, but we are all so overwhelmed with so much online now and Zoom calls, like, oh. So anything you can do to engage the audience throughout the presentation is helpful. Thank you, Pedro. There's another alliteration. Pedro Perez, look at that. Some people say that one of our presidents in the United States named Woodrow Wilson, WW, got elected because his name was easier to remember. All right, let's go to, all right, happy to report that sometimes, yeah, a good majority of you are telling stories sometimes or most of the time. Bravo, keep up the good work. All right, stories. They work because they're engaging, memorable, sticky. They help bring facts to life. They help the medicine go down. There's an old movie called, what was it called? Just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Who was that? I don't remember. Somebody type it in the chat. There we go. Oh, John says, I'm jumping around here, forgive me. Alliteration, artful aid. Yes, history of Mr. Polly. H.G. Wells, perfect. Anyway, Mary Poppins was her name. She said that medicine goes down easier with a spoonful of sugar. So similarly, your key points go down easier with a story. Stories are everywhere. The key is to write them down the moment you think about it. Ink it when you think it. Write them down. And you don't want to just tell stories for entertainment. They've got to have a point, and they must be relevant and applicable to the talk that you're giving. All right. Tool number 7 of 9 is creating a vision of a brighter tomorrow. Some of you may know Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., great speaker in the United States, and he gave the I Have a Dream speech. I think it was 1963-ish. And he talked about having a vision of what life will be like one day. I have a dream that one day this. I have a dream one day that. He's painting a picture of a brighter tomorrow, what life would be like if we implement the programs that he was talking about. On a much smaller scale, here's how a real estate agent used that same technique with me when she was showing me condominiums that I might want to buy out in California when I was a single person with no dates, no women to go out with. And she said, walking out onto this balcony, can't you just see a Weber barbecue out here and a table for two with a candlelight dinner? So she's painting a picture of me out there with a romantic dinner. And that was a long time ago. And it stuck with me because it was a story that addressed one of my personal emotional needs. All right, number 8, showing a powerful visual. Showing a powerful visual. Notice your emotions as you're looking at these pictures. You have an emotional response. People buy with emotion. Dropping in a picture. Now, it's got to be relevant and on target. Otherwise, people might feel, I think this person's trying to trick me. No, we don't want that. So it's got to be, based in integrity and good intent, but a powerful visual. Finally, appeal to emotion. Aristotle, the father of rhetoric and persuasion, said that to get somebody to say yes, we've got to be successful in 3 ways. 1, appealing to logic, being credible in the eyes of the audience, and 3, appealing to emotion. Especially we as engineers and computer folks don't often think about emotion. We're thinking Spock based all his decisions on logic. Well, even the most logical people have emotions. So as C.S. Lewis, the author, said, more truth is comprehended through the emotions than the intellect. So how do we appeal to emotion? Well, it gets back to what I said earlier. Think about what the people are like. What are their hopes and fears, their dreams, their desires? What do they want to avoid? And when you plug that into your mental computer, that will help you come up with messages that address those emotions. All right, there you have the 9 tools. Having variety is important so that it's just not all data or all stories. Having variety helps keep the audience engaged. All right, let's look at how to shape and structure your message. Message in a bottle. So what I have observed, most people that are smart like you, a technical audience, the people that I work with most, we try to pack in too much. We take everything we know as represented by the blue dots and try to jam it into however much time we have. What we want to do is think about the audience, the key points, the key goal of our presentation, and identify the things that are most on target. 3, 4, 5, 6 key messages, wrap them under 3 main points, and then describe them using the tools that we just went through. We don't want too much content. That is the biggest mistake I see, especially to the person who talked about talking to people with English as a second language. Fewer key points told really clearly. I love the Alfred Hitchcock quote, drama is life with the dull bits cut out. So don't think about packing in more, thinking about taking content out that's not relevant. Here's another similar quote. Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. A good piece of sculpture is a raw piece of wood or marble, and the artist takes pieces away. We want the same concept in mind. I'm going to do a quick look at the questions. Jeff Blaze asked, going back to the story about the real estate and the condominium. Yes, I did buy the condo, and my love life improved dramatically. I met my wife, and I wish I still had the condo. It's worth a lot of money now, but we sold it. Anyway, all right. How to structure your message. Here are a couple of frameworks, one for speech to persuade and another to inform. Starting out with a hook, some way to capture their attention. Let's focus now. You'll get the slides later. You can look at these later. But let's give an example of a presentation to persuade. Okay, so we'll go through each of these 5 steps. Hook, something to get their attention, because when we walk in the room, people are not thinking about us. They're wrapped up in their phones, their last meeting, what's for dinner. So we want to like grab their attention. Here are several ways you can do that. Giving a startling fact, maybe a surprising insight, telling a story, maybe giving a statistic, asking a question, giving a quote, giving a prediction. Maybe if they're senior busy executives, giving the bottom line up front, BLUF. Net it out and then go into detail as needed. All right? Okay, there we go. Then we talk about the situation. This would be the current state. Currently, our corporate objective is to reduce costs by 20%. One of our cost overruns here in the IT department is in cloud computing. Today, I'd like to propose 3 ways to go about reducing the costs in our cloud expenditures so that we can not only help achieve that corporate goal of 20%, but streamline the process and ensure that we take no additional risk, that our jobs will be secure, and So you're giving that situation, you're touching on those unspoken fears right up front. Okay, then let's go into the solution. All right, so I've proposed that we go out to bid on these cloud computing. Here's how we're going to go about doing it. All right, and here's where you'd pull in, you're going to have 3 key points, and then you're going to use the tools of persuasion, the tools of communication to elaborate, explain, make your point, within those 3 key points. So here are we've described the situation. We've got point 1, point 2, point 3. Now the transitions there. All right, we've just talked about point 1 and how it will do this, Let's talk now about the second way we're going to do that. X, Y, Z, A, B, C. All right, we've covered point 1, point 2. Let's wrap it up with point 3. Now, a good presenter, as you're presenting, would be reading the audience, and maybe by the time you get to point 3, they're on board, they're convinced. So you want to maybe say, hey, it sounds like people are on board already. I'm happy to go into detail on this 3rd point. If you feel that just a quick summary would be just as good, how do you feel about that? So you're asking, yeah, we got it. Just give us a quick summary. We got to get going. So you're reading the audience and maybe adjusting as you go. And then we want to go to the payoff. So current situation, solution, here's the payoff. This is like that vision of a brighter tomorrow. Here's what's in it for them. If we do this right, we're not only going to save money, but we can relax easier when our performance reviews come in. We've actually got a stronger cloud environment, and we've kept our jobs, or whatever it is. So you're painting that vision of the brighter tomorrow, and finding a way to create some urgency and desire. Maybe there's a deadline, or maybe the vendors you've been interviewing have given you a deadline, or if we implement this in the next 30 days, we can realize actually 25% savings. We can wait. If we do, we'll get that 20%. There is some benefit to doing it now. So finding a way to light a fire will help you gain that approval. And then finally, a request. Here's what we need to do. I'm asking you today to or request for commitment, or here are the next steps. So some kind of request of your audience. So there it is, the problem, the solution with your 3 key points, and the payoff. I'm going to skip the example. I think I kind of showed that pretty well there. Let's talk briefly about delivery skills. One is 5 quick tips on visuals. The other key mistake I see technical people make is they write out word for word their entire script on the slide. Okay, we don't want to do that. Now, if you give the audience a handout electronically or in paper form, that's okay for them to have that detail in front of them. But you don't want it up on the slide, and you don't want to be reading it word for word. What you want to do is, sure, think through what you're going to say, no problem with that, but in the actual PowerPoint, move that to the notes section and then have a visual that supports your key point. So here are a couple ways to do that. One, a few bullets with a diagram. Two, just the diagram. Okay? Make sense? Use visuals to support. Now, forgive all the United States speaker examples. These are the ones I'm familiar with. In early 1961, in the early 1960s, I might have 63, 61, I think. John F. Kennedy, then president of the United States, gave the famous moonshot speech in which he said, by the end of this decade, we will fly a man to the moon and have him return to Earth safely. Now, he didn't have PowerPoints, didn't need them, but using that speech as an example, here are a few ways that PowerPoint slides could have been supported. Version 1, or used to support his speech. Version 1, he could have written word for word up on the screen. Version 2, he could have had some bullet points, a few words with each bullet. Version 3, picture of the moon with bullets. Version 4, just a picture of the moon. Did you notice how your emotions change there? This is good. But wow, when you see just a picture, there's a feeling of awe. And that's what we want to do during our talks. Create that feeling of awe. Could also put the bullets in the picture. You could make it funny, the cow jumping over the moon. Okay, so here's an example of that, another example of words turned into visuals using pictures. So this is from an actual client, had even more words up on the screen. I said, what's going on here? And he said, well, in this petrochemical plant, there are a lot of gases in the air, and if a spark goes off, the whole place blows up. I said, why don't you just put a picture of the plant blowing up? That will have a much more dramatic effect. And he said, oh, that's a good idea. All right. Number 3, have one idea per slide. There are about at least 4 ideas on this slide. So we want to split that into other slides and then use the techniques we've talked about to get the words off the slide. If you need words on the screen, the general rule of thumb is the 5x5 rule. Have no more than 5 bullets and have no more than 5 words per each bullet. Okay, so 5x5. If you've got to show a complex diagram, my recommendation is to show the entire flow, circle the key point, the key step that you're going to describe in detail, and then have a close-up of that slide, of that step. So big picture, multiple steps, circle the one you're about to talk about now, tell people we're going to talk about this one now, and then zoom in on just that one part so they know where we are, versus keeping the big diagram with all the steps up for the entire talk. Another way to do that is to use call outs, circle, arrows, and so forth. Finally, and we'll go to some questions, unless you'd like to go a little bit over. Here are some model slides. Now, these require graphic artists, but these give you an example of what the high end of visuals look like in today's presentation market. Again, just look how clean that is. 5 colors, short number of words. That's a little more complex. Here's an example of that here's an emotional picture with the words laid over on top. Another technique that you can use, instead of having your key points arranged vertically, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, have them horizontally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're actually easier to absorb horizontally, so you can spread them out just like on this slide. Here's another example of that same thing. This is using drawings, icons, instead of pictures. But again, notice that horizontal flow, easier to absorb. All right, let me just quick couple of points on delivery. One is be you. Be you. Just be the best version of you. Don't put on airs. Don't try to be formal. Well, you want to address the formality of the audience, but what I'm saying is don't put on this fake front. Practice early and often. I recommend not memorizing. Be able to speak from prompts, meaning the bullet points up on the screen. Yeah, Scott's coming off. Give me the hook. Do not over rehearse. Have a warm up routine. Eye contact, the rule of thumb is one person per thought bite. So a little phrase here, a little phrase there. And finally, movement, get grounded, move the stage around. So deliver on this side, your main point, your first point, maybe move to the left side for your second point, and then come back to the middle for your third point. All right, that does it. I hope this was helpful. Scott's on. I see a couple other questions here. If you would like an article on influence in general, send me an email, IEEECS in the subject line. There's my email address. All right, I see a couple of questions. You mentioned before presenting to a non-native English audience, but what about the opposite? Presenting in English when you aren't a native English speaker. Yes, great. Practice, practice, practice. It depends how much of an accent you have. We want to make sure that people can really understand what you're saying. So first of all, accents are sometimes a benefit. People with an English accent sound really smart. So I wouldn't say accents are always a bad thing. The key is clarity, and maybe you've got to go a little bit slower to make sure people are understanding what you're saying. Some languages, the tradition is to speak really fast. And if you're one of those, I highly urge slowly, deliberately, and making sure your key points are really clear and you're not trying to pack in too much information. Thank you, Pedro. I hope that was helpful. Thanks, Scott. I hope I didn't ramble on here too long.
No, not at all. That was a great presentation. I know I sort of picked up a few things, and I think the audience did as well from their all the great questions they sent in. Just a quick programming note before we wrap up here. The Computer Society does have 4 webinars coming up in April. We'll have 2 actually on April 4th. The first will be at 11 a.m. Eastern from our standards webinar series from standard 802.11, which is on the future of Wi-Fi standards. Then in the evening at 8 p.m. we'll have a very special event. We will be doing an AMA with the IEEE's Computer Society's leadership. The guest speakers that night will be our current president, our president-elect, and our second VP. On the 13th, we'll have the next webinar from this series on how to stop wasting time in meetings. And our 4th and final webinar in April will be also from the standard series titled You Don't Say Standardizing Inclusive Language. You'll receive links to register for all these events in tomorrow's email. There are a couple questions about the slides. You'll also receive a summary set of these slides, as well as a link to the recording. Roger, thank you again for being here. As always, thanks you for all your great insight, tips, and tools. Everyone, thank you for attending and your participation, and have a great rest of your day.